Welcome back, friends, fellow philosophers, and authors to this Wild Isle writing cast. I have back with me on the podcast again, Amaya Tenshi and Erwin Blackthorn. How you guys doing today?
I'm
Nodding,
alive.
nodding. So we're good.
Tired.
Yeah. Rumors,
Alive
rumors
and
of my
tired.
death.
Yeah. So today, this episode is going to be a kind of sequel to the last one. So before we had the Panther's Guide to Planning, led by Amaya. Thank you very much, Amaya, for teaching we Pantsers how
Woo!
to properly plan our stories so they don't
Maybe.
go totally off the rails. Today, though, we're going to jump into the Planner's Guide to Pantsing. You don't know how hard it was for me to think that through to say it the right way around. I'll be leading this one today as our representative pantser. Unless we have a visit by Matt Dawson, he might jump in and give us some pantsing advice as well. And I want you guys to listen closely and then to pepper me with questions and try to tear apart my methodology as best you can.
Okay.
Now,
Will
before
do.
we thank you. All right. So before we begin, very quick show. If you don't know, I run Wild Isle Literature at wildislelit.com. I'm an author editor there. I do line editing primarily and ghostwriting, and I sell my own novels, including I'll be bringing this up today, Wand Smoke Broken, which is a full-length novel, and a little novella that I have out, The Tears of Winter. There's going to be 6 more of these. These are little cute things you could just pick up. They're cheap, easy to read. I hope that you read them. Amaya, where can people find your stuff? And then Erwin will do you after.
Well, I have 3 books out. I only have 2 that I can show as examples here. Dracula's Guest, the first one, Dracula's Match, the second one. You can find them on Amazon, Goodreads, most of the places that you can buy books. I think the first one, Dracula's Guest, can still be ordered from Barnes & Noble if you want to do it that way as well. So, I will say, though, that I'm leaving my publisher, so we're going to see how long that's the case. But for right now, on Kindle, they're all still really cheap. So,
All right, so pick up Amaya's stuff. Erwin, tell people about you and where they can get your stuff and look at your portfolio, resume, whatever you want to call it.
You can find all my things at rtdlh on Reddit or on YouTube at Erwin Blackthorn. Most of my videos are about book analysis or video game analysis, and I'm gonna start resuming those videos pretty soon, actually. And I've been coming out with some articles recently, but I had to put it on pause to make videos. But mostly, I just handle things like aesthetics, talk about alchemy in relation to writing, and I guess kind of current events when it comes to gaming and movies and stuff.
Awesome. So we'll have your links, both of your links below the video or audio if it's on SoundCloud or getting it that way. Okay, so we won't have any further ado. Um, Pantsing. I think, as we always should, we should start out with definitions. So, obviously, we've put pantsing in opposition to planning. And like we discussed last time, planning is, let's say, generating the content and then sequencing it and then fleshing it out before the act of composition. Um, well, Amaya and Erwin, do you think that's a fair description of planning before I define pantsing? So it's to say that one more time quickly, the generation of the content, the sequencing of that content, the fleshing out of that content, making sure it's all coherent before the act of composition. Not that you can't go back and do it more after, but the idea of planning is doing it before, then composing after. Does that sound right to you guys?
to me, it does, yeah.
Yeah, as long as it's about the act of writing that's planned out, then it makes sense to me. Because there's a concept that's always planned out by both sides, but then there's the act of writing that gets planned out by the plotter.
Yes.
Like the
Okay. So
limits and everything, like how far you're gonna go, how many words you're gonna do, how many chapters even.
yeah. And so if that fits out, then I want to propose to you guys the definition for pantsing is the generation of content during the act of composition as opposed to before. So I want to put in some caveats because I think a lot of people have a wrong idea about what it means to, write off the seat of your pants or to write organically. And so I want to help define what pantsing is by defining what it is not, right? Because that'll help us see the borders where this concept actually stops. So I want to say that um, pantsing is not writing without any notion of direction, right? You can't you I mean, you could do that, but that's not advisable. And you don't have to do that to be writing organically, right? So I mentioned right before we started recording, I personally will write an outline. Now you might say, well, MarQuese, if you're writing an outline, are you not planning it out? I would be if I followed it, but I don't. The act of giving writing the outline is to give myself a sense of direction to start off on. But if I'm going to run 1,000 steps and I plot out the first 15 and I follow the first five and then the rest deviates, uh, it's not exactly a planned out or mapped out course. It was more of a motivational technique, a way of, let's say, getting the juices flowing. So pantsing is not writing without direction. I want to put out there. Also, what it is not is writing whatever you want or whatever happens to come to mind. I think a lot of people, when they think of writing organically or they think of writing off the seat of their pants, imagine that they can indulge in all of their whims. And that's not the case. So, writing as an art form necessarily has constraints, because if it didn't have constraints, it would not be an art form. It just becomes arbitrary noise. And I think that people, I'll say this here, lots of people who write and say that they're pantsing are really not doing that properly. They're self-indulgent, and they're writing to please themselves in the moment in a way that one might indulge in a reverie and not engage with reality, which will buff against you and force you to make changes and alteration to see what fits. So, to round that out, pantsing is the generation of content during the act of composition. However, it is not writing without direction. You can and actually should have some direction to start you off, so roundabouts which way you want to start going. Maybe you don't end up going there. Maybe you start going that way, take two left turns, and then um, end up in revision cutting off that front bit. That can happen. Um, it's also not writing whatever you want. You have to obey the constraints that I'm going to describe later on, but necessarily plot has particular forms. Characters have to have a certain level of verisimilitude, or else they're not relatable. Stylistically, you need to be writing with some coherence, some type of grammatical structure and rules, or else the reader can't understand you. So, has anything I said been objectionable, or if not objectionable, do you think that I am stretching or artificially confining the idea of pantsing insofar as you have seen it used? Do I have it right? Is it too broad? Is it too narrow? What do you think?
I think that's okay as a definition.
I'm trying to think of
Erwin?
where areas that people can get these confused when having this explained to them because I don't know, like it feels like people who pants are really dedicated to pantsing, refraining from plotting, but then they'll still, like tiny plots of things, but not really like a plot, just a direction to go. And I think it's the same way as how people work out. And the aim to working out is to gain muscle, endurance, whatever you need. You have a opposite goal than the actual act of working out in mind, right?
Yeah,
I
you have a
feel like
different
pantsers,
goal.
well, yeah, well, pantsers are there to get the goal. That's not the actual working out. And then plotters seem to be there for the actual function of working out in like a checklist kind of way. And I think that's the main difference that people can get a better grasp on.
Hmm.
Do you disagree, Amaya? Express your disagreement. We must debate as much
Well,
as
with the
possible.
sorry, well, my issue with that, and this happens with any metaphor that you use, is you're bringing in other connotations. Because maybe I misunderstood there, but it almost
Well, here
sounds
it's about
like,
intention.
well, because if I was going to use the working out metaphor, and this would be obviously how I feel about
Yeah.
pantsing versus plotting, both pantsers and plotters want to get fit, right? That is the end goal for both of them, or lose weight, or
Yep.
whatever it is. They're functionally at the gym
Yep.
for the exact same reason. The difference might be that a plotter, let's say, does the research and says, okay, well, I'm supposed to like build muscle on these days and then take a break on those days, and like I'm going to adhere to the regimen, shall we say. Whereas the pantser's like, I feel like
Yeah.
going to the gym today and I'm gonna kill it and I'm gonna do all this stuff and it's gonna be great. And maybe the next day I don't, feel like it, but that's okay. We'll come back the day after and I haven't tried this, before, and let's see how this goes. Maybe I like this
Yeah.
exercise and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
go full here and that's cool, right? So like I said, maybe I misunderstood kind of the point you were making, but
I said it in a weird way. My brain and mouth aren't working today. Sorry, they're absent.
oh dear.
I want to jump in there because um, the it's funny because this doesn't apply to me working out because I do like a very routine workout every single day. But in terms of the pantser working out, I think a better analogy would be the guy who says, "All right, I'm going to go to the gym every day." There's no determination about what he has to do at the gym. He's just going to
Yeah,
go there. He's going to go there, and he's going
Mhm.
to and that might be it. He just goes there, and
and
a
do
lot of
stuff
people
until he
find
gets tired.
yeah,
Yeah.
or even like that's not even part of the goal. A lot of people will have their constraint be I need to go there, and it doesn't like they don't actually even have it. I need to work out because what they kind of know they start to understand is when they show up there and they've already gone there, they've already sunk time into it. That their monkey bodies will be like, all right, you're already here, man. Let's fine, we'll do it now. And then after they start doing something, like maybe okay, I'll just run a couple laps, and then like I'm already running a couple laps. I might as well run a mile. I already made it a mile. I'm feeling okay. I might as well run 2 miles. And um, I think that that's perhaps a slight modification that makes it a little bit more applicable to
Hmm.
pantsing. But Matt Dawson, writer, artist, sound designer, game designer, all kind of things. Machine Hearts. Check him out. He wasn't here for the intro. He has jumped in. So Matt, what do you think about that analogy that I just put on for pantsing for writing? So is it similar in a way to having you have a direction, but that direction is flexible so that it allows the consistent initiation of the act, but does not constrain what that act necessitates. Does that sound right?
I think that's where I would take it as well. Yeah. The big thing is there's either the setting to be a little bit more concrete from how I view it. There's either the setting or the character say evocation. There's a certain exploration that comes from pantsing, and I would say that's pretty much how I would describe it. Yes.
Okay. And Matt, really quickly, did you catch the definition I gave for pantsing in contrast to planning?
I think I missed it.
Okay, it's only like a sentence long, so I'll give that really quickly, jumping
Say
back
it
to my
again.
notes. Yep, say it again for all you hear. So planning essentially is the generation of content prior, and there's more than just the generation, like the sequencing and all that, prior to the act of composition, whereas pantsing is generation of content primarily during the act of composition. So it's a before or during is the main contrast. Um, I wanted to know if perhaps you being our fellow pantser, if you have a different way of framing um, pantsing and planning in contrast with one another.
Yeah, I would say it's probably uh, in parallel with that, but
Okay, so that'll
organize.
be a good. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. No, I was gonna say, planning or organizing is generating the concepts of and the relationships of a story before the actual plot occurs, whereas pantsing is um, creating a plot and then developing the relationships from that plot.
Okay, so pretty in accord with what we've gone so far. Okay, so from here on out, we'll try to make it a little bit personal. So I'm going to give my personal pantsing process. I'm going to use One Smoke Broken, particularly the formation of that novel, as an example. And then I would say we'll open the floor to questions from anybody. And please do ask as many argumentative things as possible. I think that'd be the most fun. Pick my process apart and ask where, why, this could go wrong if you do things this way. And then Matt,
Is it okay
if
if we like
if
interrupt? Sorry, sorry for interrupting, but
yeah,
is it okay if we interrupt like while you're doing
please
your
do.
explanation?
Yeah, please
Okay,
do. That's
okay.
probably the best way, because otherwise I'll just be jabbering on forever.
I'm sorry. I'm too like polite when it comes to these kinds of things. So I feel like interrupting is like really like like puts the brakes on everything. But yeah,
No, please slam on the brakes, and Amaya, please don't feel bad about doing it. You should interrupt more often as well.
Amaya, if you
I think
interrupt, just don't take 3 hours. Thank you.
there's the ever polite Erwin that we just heard. I'm kidding. All right, so let's go into it, right? So our listeners aren't listening to us banter too much. So unfortunately, I'm going to use some terminology that I picked up from grad school. It's a bit pretentious and annoying, and I myself hate it, but I couldn't think of a better term, so forgive me. So, in my process of pantsing, I typically start from a seed idea. The reason I hate that is there's a freaking seminar where this lady just kept saying, "What's the seed of that? What's the seed of that?" It was the most annoying thing ever. But I do indeed start from a seed idea. Typically, this is like a character, an element of the setting, or a thematic question. Um, I don't see a reason why you couldn't start from a plot type, though I never do this. But I could definitely see someone saying, "I'm going to write a mystery story," and then like going about generating the ideas from there. I don't know why I don't do that. Maybe in my explanation, one of you guys can figure it out. My aversion from doing that, but there's no reason why I don't think it should be able to done. And the order I listed them in is the most common order that I generate the ideas from, like character first. Then there ends up being an element of setting that I might start a story from. Um, and least
So
often
when you're
is
pantsing
this
a
a
setting,
mhm.
do you also do like a lot of world building, or do you do like little seeds of world building that branch out to more things?
There I would start out from like one seed element of world building, and then usually the next move is actually not another element of world building. Usually it
So
ends up.
in wand smoke, did you start with I don't know, like a wand, or what did you start off with as your seed?
So my initial seed for Wand Smoke actually was the character. It was Conti, who is a
Hmm.
yeah. So I guess we can kind of jump into it right there. That's a really great segue,
There you
actually.
go.
Thank you, Erwin.
Is
Thank you
Conti
for
a
interrupting me.
Kantian?
No, I don't think so. So the name Conti, this is my process. I think of myself as like Frankenstein making monsters out of a bunch of different parts. So
Yeah.
I've said this before in the podcast. I'm not in the least bit original. Not even at all. So I grew up watching way too much anime. One of the formative ones when I was in like sixth grade. So how old would I have been? Like 11, something like that, 12. I can't remember how old, but I was fully coolly.
Anime was
Um,
invented back then?
it was on Adult Swim, late at night. And for those of you who remember that, on Cartoon Network, and back when
Yeah.
people watched televisions, and I watched fully coolly. It's like a little 6 episode thing, and one of the characters in there is a robot. Named Conti. There's an episode called Fire Starters where one of the characters, Mamimi, is an arsonist burning down buildings, particularly ones that she had suffered or feels that she suffered from in her childhood. And she plays this game where you play as an agent of Conti, Lord of the Black Flame, and you go around in this little pocket video game, essentially burning down the city of Ennsville. And she's playing that out in real life as the arsonist, and so she's looking for a thing to project the idea of Conti, the Lord of the Black Flame, onto. And she projects it onto this robot who is named Conti. I don't know why his. Oh, actually, does
Are
she?
you
Yeah,
allowed to
she
do that?
names
Like,
him.
legally?
Say that
I'm just
again.
saying because I mean, obviously, I read some of your book here. In that case, some of the details that you're including here are very much just straight up in your novel. Are you allowed to just take that much and apply it into a novel
Are you
from
accusing him
someone
of
else?
copyright infringement?
Well,
I
because I
think
mean,
that's
like, Concept Lord of the Black Flame is like it's literally in.
I
Like, I
consider that
get it.
pastiche. Like an homage.
Maybe.
It ties in. Yeah.
Okay.
so. Here's my thought about it. The Conti
You're
in
allowed to
my
do that,
book.
Maya, just for your question. Like you are allowed to do that because it's completely different setting, completely different plot, everything's different. It's like having a knockoff Indiana Jones in the beginning of that one Godzilla movie.
Yeah, but you wouldn't call him Indiana Jones. You just have like Indiana Jones and the Time Travelers, and and now it's a time travel sci-fi. But he's still Indiana Jones and it's still his real name is still Henry, and he's still named after the
Conti is
dog.
only one name; it's not two.
Well, yeah, but
so,
Lord of the
you
Black
know,
Flame though is like the whole title. I'm saying there's
I
like
took
more
okay, so
coming
yeah, I
along.
took the name I took the name and the title, but the character has
MarQuese is
nothing
sledding.
in. No, I tell these people all the time. I did take the name because I liked it, and then I thought, what if we took the name literally? Because in the anime, the character isn't that at all. Like it's this total fantasy from the character Mamimi, right? And I thought, okay, what if I took
Mm,
that literally? And actually, before I'd written this novel years before, I was playing D&D with my friends, and I made a character, Conti, Lord of the Black Flame, and I decided to make him a troglodyte. If you want to know where that came from. Now, so there was this D&D character based on this anime character. The D&D character didn't have anything to do with the anime character really, other than I took the name and thought, what if I took this
mm,
and ran with it? And then years later, I come to write the novel. I really liked that character. And so I took it. And also the Lord of Fear is also ripped from Fully Cooley. Now this comes from, again, the same character from Mimi worshiping like this bomb that's falling that everyone thinks is like a shooting star or something that's gonna destroy everything. And she's up on this thing and she yells out like "Lord of Fear, hail!" That's also where I got that from. But then I stripped that, put that into a different character, and because I liked that scene, I thought it was funny, and then I thought I could make it kind of cute by again Frankensteining. I took that, put it
mm.
onto different characters who have the same names, but that are telling an I would argue an entirely different story. Like I don't know if any of you've seen Fully Cooley, but there's not a whole lot of
I've seen
similarity
only bits.
aside. Yeah, well, if you watch it through, it's like, okay, this is a weird reference for the D&D thing. Makes much more sense, right? But the Fully Cooley aspect from the inspiration done on too much. But anyway, Conti was the seed, and so when when I started from that character seed, the question is, okay, I liked the titles Lord of Fear, I like the titles Lord of the Black Flame. Um, there's two. Which one am I going to pick, or am I going to pick both? If I'm going to pick both, why both? Immediately, it starts this series of, starts this series of questions, and in order to answer those questions, you have to start making decisions that make the initial seed fit into, or rather, the decisions you make have to fit the seed. So, um, okay, well, he's a lord of something, so he's kind of like a cult leader. Okay, and let's say Lord of the
Just
Black
sounds
Flame seems
suspiciously like planning to me.
well. I didn't come up with this before. I'm
Okay, so you're
writing
saying
Well, I don't
like
think
it.
it's
while I'm
planning.
doing this.
I think it's just answering questions that you set up as because a seed is a question that
Yeah,
you're answering later on with your storytelling, and you can just make up stuff and see if it fits. And I don't think that's really like a plan. It's like, okay, if it did fit, then continue. If it didn't, then redo it. Yeah,
yeah.
like it
Essentially,
just
so I'm
happened
sitting
to
there.
fit as a cult leader, right?
Yeah, well, I start
Like
writing, and I
let's
got.
say he was
Go
Lord and
ahead.
he ended up being a king. Would that fit or not really?
Would fit.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it could. You could make that, right? Like I could have had like an epic fantasy setting, that would have fit the title Lord in, and maybe he was like a
And then
lesser
the whole
lord who has a
story would
punishment.
change to be like a king thing, and then it would like a lot of stuff in the plot change after that.
Well, yeah, right, because it would be it would go from Conti, Lord of Fear. Why is he Lord of Fear? Because he's a cult leader. Okay, so he's a cult leader. Where is he leading from? He's in a cave, right? And
Mm.
he's out. He's like he is he a successful cult leader? Yes or no? Right? No, he's an outcast. He's
well, I
this is
wouldn't say
his
he's
self
a cult leader
styled.
at all. To
Well,
be
he is a
honest.
one. He's got one follower, right? So he's a
Well,
wannabe.
He's like Christian. He has like he has a selection of
no,
followers.
Christian is more. No, but I mean, like in the sense that quite a lot of the rest of Conti doesn't seem to me to be like your average cult leader. I mean, maybe at first, like I mean, he's such an antisocial person, especially at first. He doesn't even seem to want other people around. Like he sort of tolerates Broken and kind of needs her and resents that he needs her. But that's not, as far as I can tell, how cult leaders usually work. right?
That's
They
probably why
desperately
he
want
Oh,
doesn't
you want
say
him to
that
be like
way.
more charismatic and more like a psychopath, like trying to like
Well,
bring in
right,
more people.
and like where the delusions of grandeur don't even start until like long after this entire initial conceit. Like the fact that you're Marquez, I'm sorry, but the fact that you're saying you conceive him as a cult leader, I'm just sitting here going, it what? I'd never picked that up. Now other people maybe follow him and try to like thrust that upon him, sort of, but that only is long after the plot begins, right? It's not something he's seeking or that he seems to embrace unless he absolutely figures like, oh, okay, if I don't do this, then maybe I die. So I guess I'm in charge now or something. Haha, hope everyone's scared of me.
So,
But
MarQuese, are you saying cult leader like as a symbol, or like he's an actual cult leader?
No, it's it's not even a symbol. It's so I had this notion that he was not not all that he was cracked up to be. Like
Okay,
he was bitter. Like
sure.
he was
these
deceptive.
yeah, like when I
He was creating
imagined
like a
him as a
false reality for
well, like
the person broken, right?
yeah, he was a troglodyte, right? So I took that aspect from like the
Yeah.
character I made from D&D, and I was like, what does it mean to be a troglodyte? You're in like you're underground. We think of troglodytes sort of like we think of basement dwelling trolls. He's a loser,
Mhm.
right? And he's
Yeah, no, I
and
definitely
that's
picked up like he would be a school shooter in a different lifetime, but that's not the same thing as a cult leader.
no, I'm not. Well, I should say perhaps he's not a cult leader, but
Well,
like he wants to be that because that would positions him in a point
mm,
of power and fame, and it's a an indulgent reverie on his part, right? But all of those things came out of well, uh, he's a troglodyte with these particular
can I make a
titles.
comparison that might be offensive?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is it kind of like Randy Stair, where he kind of thought he had a cult, but there was like no actual followers. He was just a guy that thought he was a ghost,
I I have no idea.
Not even thought like
hermit.
he knows it. It's worse than that. He knows that it's not the case, but he like really wishes it was the case, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
like that kind of
he's
thing. Okay, so it is a little bit
yeah.
like that school shooter thing. Then
It's
yeah,
exactly like a
compare it. Yeah,
school
yeah.
shooter.
Yeah, like where he definitely has a ton of resentment and he sort of wants to be in a position of power, but I don't know, to me this maybe I don't
I
understand
like
cult
that kind
leader.
of character, Marquise. Okay, don't listen to Amaya there. She's just a naysayer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
this guy.
however you feel about the character is fine. The idea is, I didn't know how the titles were exactly going to work in when I wrote him. I knew that he was a troglodyte. That's how I knew he was an outcast, which kind of told me that he was a loser. And then I thought, if he's okay, does he have anyone underneath him? And like, okay, the only person underneath him is like another more broken, essentially more rejected outcast.
Hmm.
And then that's how like got broken, and broken comes from I guess a secondary seed idea for a character, because at that point so this is kind of the generation, this is where I really wanted to get to with pantsing, because I didn't get to broken's
Yeah.
existence until I got to that point writing the first chapter. And then because it starts out with Conti talking about himself, like men call us troglodytes but we are human
So
once.
first chapter, Broken didn't even exist, right?
Not chapter, it's like the first page or whatever. It's like not very far into it before
I
the
know what you
the
mean. The
story.
like so in the yeah, so like Broken had to exist after you started writing.
Yeah, let me actually. I just have the goddamn book in front of me. Like I should just look and
This
see
has
how
turned
long
now
it
into the
took.
podcast of let's like attack
This is
Marquez's work. Like,
frustrating. This
Please
is like
do,
an
please do.
interrogation.
Let's see.
hey
Yeah, yeah.
Matt,
So
you're
the
missing
first two.
out. You could always be part of it. It's be the bully
Yeah,
session.
Matt, let's grill you on your
Yeah,
pantsing.
Yeah. So while we're looking this up, I guess my entire process boils down to a paraphrase from Ian Forster, which is the difference between story and plot is story is king died, the queen died. Plot is the king died and the queen died of heartache. So basically, that is my entire process for developing a novel, start to finish. So to actually be a little bit more tangible, I mean something like I take 3 bullet points, right? Start, middle point where we begin the total ascension to the climax, and then how the climax is resolved. And I do that for the entire novel, and I do that for chapters. And I do that
Do you do that
roughly
for
30.
paragraphs also?
I actually do it at the sentence level. I fit them right in between the spaces.
Yeah, because I don't think pantsers really think of how a paragraph is going to end. It feels like sometimes pantsers they'll have their paragraphs carry on the same idea, but they'll split them. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I used to have that problem where paragraphs would lift multiple things, and it would become very confusing about who was
Mm-hmm.
doing what, where, why, and when.
So you feel like you have a little bit more editing to do after writing?
No, I just changed how I draft, my drafting habits. So
Okay.
keep a focus, one paragraph, one idea, one thought, and then a chapter is a series of thoughts made in paragraph form.
So do pantsers have a big problem with info dumps?
Is that for the
Like in the
floor?
act of writing, you just have like a big moment of your brain saying, "Oh my god, there's like, so much information I got to put down." And you're like trying to write notes, but then you forget you're not writing notes; you're writing a story, and you have like a big info dump, like 3 pages of just lore, like kind of like set up there.
That is a risk, but I think there's also a risk of that in plotting as well, because
You have that
even
problem
when
too,
you plot,
MarQuese, or not really?
you have this giant, say, concept list, and in between that, you need to explain why these concepts are tied together. So I don't think that's exclusively a painter or a plotter uh,
Yeah.
risk, unless your plans are so comprehensive, you've basically already wrote the story, in which that's
Yeah.
effectively pantsing.
To answer
MarQuese
your
comment.
question, Erwin, and also to comment, I agree that with Matt that that's not exclusively a Panther problem. I've seen info dumps on planners as well. But in terms of is that a problem for me? No, but the reason why it's not to be, at least I don't believe it is. If anyone has looked at my work and says it is, let me know. But that's not a critique I've gotten. Um, I don't write in that way because I actually take the pantsing down to the level of you just mentioned taking things down to level of the sentence. This is a bit of an aside, but not really. I um when I'm writing the sentence, the way that the sentence comes out, it has to fit in a number of ways. Particularly for me, rhythmically really matters. Like I needs to have a certain. Um, it's hard to describe. It's not a scheme, right? Because it's not meter or anything
Like a
like
feet
that.
and meter has like a little like dun dun dun
Well,
dun dun
feet,
dun.
yes. Like feet, yes. So like
Yeah.
the way that the tense, like the what's it called? Stressed and unstressed
Syllables.
syllables land. Yeah, the way the stresses and the unstresses. Like there's some, if it sounds to me like a drunk stumbling, particularly at the end of a sentence, like I hate that, and I'll sit there and rework. Now Matt has seen this, so Matt might be able to comment. But I will sit there and rework and like a sentence like building it out, like building out, cut back, build, cut back, build, cut back, build, cut back until it fits right before I'll move on.
Hmm.
Because and the reason why is because if I don't do that, then what happens is like some people I've heard like Jordan Peterson for instance when he recommends writing, and this is probably good for most people, I think it's good advice, is that you write out like the paragraph, then you break it apart in the sentences, and then you revise by going in that way. My problem is if I do that, I just have to rewrite the whole thing because in order for it to work, the rhythm, if you will, and the particular sounds that I use and the alliterations and all everything else have to work by generation by fitting off of the thing that came prior. To fit off the thing that came prior, to fit off. So if I just go in and break it apart, change one, like I said, of dominoes, it just fucks the whole thing up. Like it now. Oh, no, sometimes you can make a little tweak and it works if it's really small, but if it's like literally breaking a paragraph up like that, it would be ruined because there is it's not exactly a logic, but it's kind of like a logic. It's certainly a pattern that is being played out that can be disrupted by intermittent changes that I'm trying to follow that fits that pattern of generation that I just talked about from the seed character onward, right? So um,
Hmm.
in the same vein as that sentence form, the other characters are seeds generated off of the details of the prior seeds that are generated. So it's like a tree, right? So each branch has to come off somewhere from the trunk or some preceding branch. And I think that's at least my key to, I would argue, successful pantsing. Because I know, Maya, you mentioned during our planning session, right? That there's this risk, and I do think that Erwin, you've probably seen people do this when they pants, where it's kind of incoherent, where they just start adding
Oh
stuff
yeah.
in. It's like, oh, this is a cool idea, and they just try and force it in there arbitrarily.
That's quite literally my like least favorite thing of people like Stephen King. Like I remember reading some of his writing, and it just sounds. Alright.
Stephen
But
King,
yeah,
the
it just
pantser
looks
par
like he just
excellence.
added random things in there. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying Stephen King is kind of like the pantser par excellence.
He's the pantser that caused so many other pantsers to keep on pantsing, and they all suck now because of him. I'm sorry this is controversial, but
We can
a
turn
lot
this
of
into
people,
the
especially
They
on
Hate
Reddit,
Stephen
they
King
suck ass
podcast.
now because of him. He's the cause of it all. He's the one behind it.
I have an analogy with Bruce Lee for that. So now this is, you know, perhaps people disagree with this, but I actually think, you have Bruce Lee, and like Bruce Lee went and he learned a bunch of traditional forms, and he broke off of that and developed an individual fighting system. And then what he did after that is taught everyone to try to jump to the individual fighting system without having any base. And I think that that
Mm.
gave rise to um, uh, essentially a lot of um, how best to describe this. I think that there are a lot of really good fighters in the context of a sport where there are rules and a referee, and you know the conditions or whatever.
And
But
then there's like pseudo fighters.
well, even the good fighters, like even like you take like a jujitsu, like a legit jujitsu black belt, you get in and try to wrestle with them. Like as many years of martial arts training as I had, I didn't have enough grappling. They're going to take me out every single time. But
Yeah.
then my question is, like, I open up a 15th century fighting manual by Fiore de Libere, and the very first thing he says, like when the guy grabs you, gouge his eye out. And like, and it brings, or like if you're talking to my dad, like the first thing he's going to do is like pull like a little hammer out of his pocket, or a gun, or a knife. And then like my question is like, what does it mean that your entire fighting system is defeated by a small implement that any random person has? Because like that's the thing is, when you're doing jujitsu, if like someone just everyone's done the test with the knife. So you get martial artists who are good MMA fighters who've even done this. Like you can go on YouTube, watch them do it. Nobody beats the knife. It does not matter. Like no one, because it's like all they have to do is
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah,
Like
that's kind of why, like, hate to throw shade, but that's why I quit jujitsu. Because I was taking that back to the day, and at some point when I was doing all the grappling, I'm like, well, I have a question, Sensei. What if, like, in this situation, what if the guy just has a buddy? And like I'm stuck here doing this harm hold, but like, what about the other guy? You're assuming I'm gonna be in a one-on-one fight in the freaking street. I can't guarantee
That's
that,
when you
Matt.
pull out your
Ignore me.
gun.
Well, right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, why am I taking this martial art for defense if any number of factors can basically render this entire like art form completely
All right.
useless?
Any
yeah.
But,
ancient
you know,
Chinese martial art masters out there want to answer that? Go ahead, leave it in the comment
yeah, please
below.
come in the comments and be
Well,
like, "How dare you?"
I'll leave it right now because I did do a traditional Chinese form, and we did multiple sparring. We did sparring where you
Mhm.
had like two or three or four, or up to usually up to five. Because after five, it kind of doesn't make a difference, because they can't, more than five people can't gang up on you at once. It makes a difference in terms of when people get tired. But there was no holds bar in terms of like grappling while we were sparring, which is another thing. When I'll try this back in the Stephen King. I promise, listeners, just keep listening.
We're gonna
Um,
get there. We're pantsing our way through this through the
Yes, we
podcast.
are. We are. It's like a Jordan Peterson lecture, which is a pantsing lecture, um,
Yeah.
literally. So, in terms of that, what it was is like the dude could just grab you, and then like if you're fighting, by the way, if you're fighting more than one person, if one dude grabs you, you're fucked. Like I'm just sorry. Like I'm gonna let you know that. And then the question is like, how do you win? Um, Mostly you pick someone, line the people up, defeat the like crush the first person. And people don't understand this because you're used to watching like rounds in MMA fighting when people have gloves on. And people don't believe this. Take gloves off. The context of the fight changes, because what strikes work and don't work, what's going to break your hand or not break your hand, how hard you have to hit. When you don't have gloves on, you don't have to hit that hard actually. I mean, you still have to hit hard, but you don't have to hit like, this giant wind up punch to like break someone's nose or to break the orbital bone or to, or if you're allowed to strike other areas, which we were allowed, like we did all kind of things like you'd strike someone in the eyes, you can kick them in the nuts, you could do whatever. It was China, right? Sun Tzu's Art of War. All combat is deception. That was the ethos. You do what wins. You're doing monkey kung fu, grab the person's ear. And see how fast they move their head. They just, because in reality, someone doesn't want their ear torn off. Now, how am I going to tie this back into Stephen King? Well, I think that what you end up getting from someone like King, who I guarantee you read a bunch of more planned novels, understood the craft of writing beforehand, and then he went in, and I'm sure that some of his, off the wall pants stories were good, but it came down to how am I going to generate stories at a volume that I get published and now make money in this particular system. Just like the MMA fighter comes off of Bruce Lee, like it goes away from the limitation of the art form and then it applies to whatever particular set of circumstances it happens to be. And in this case, it's a market. And if I just, you know, pump stuff out, eventually some of it's going to get taken, some of it's going to get picked up. And can you hold it against him for doing that? No, he made tons of money. He's super famous.
So it's kind of like
But
when
I
an
don't.
artist they'll start off with like what do they call it, guidelines when they're doing like drawing, and then like a master of it or somebody who's more experienced, they don't need the guidelines because they already have it in their head. And then so he kind of told people, hey, you don't need guidelines, and people are like, okay, and then just make like the most wonkiest art possible.
Yeah, and also what he didn't tell people was that like a bunch of his stories actually aren't very good. I think Stephen King probably knows that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Stephen King
Yeah,
probably
and I don't
knows.
think Stephen King is worried about that,
No, he's
Like
honestly.
not.
that one with the
But
cell
he's not
phone
telling
cell.
anyone that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't
And
know.
and
In
the
his book
king
on
is
writing, I
being
guess I
prolific enough
picked that up.
to,
Sorry.
no worries. The key to King is that he's so prolific enough that he can have, 10
You can have
dud
mistakes.
and
You can
one
afford it.
like land.
yeah. That's actually true
Well,
about
And he's
I want
making
to say
so
this about.
much. That's another thing. Percentage.
Yeah, well, the what is it? I started this. I don't know if it's true, but I heard it like a decade ago listening to Stefan Molyneux, if he's still around. I know he got nuked out of YouTube, like poor Amaya here. Um, but he said that a genius success rate is something like 10%. Like they
yeah,
10% of a genius's ideas
very
work.
low. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
sounds
It's
about
just
right.
that you have to come up with more. That's what Lucas was actually really good at, but he needed someone who could like pull the good ideas out of the rest of it, and he didn't. I don't know if George Lucas understood that or not, and that
He
whether that
needed a
was part of what
wrangler.
was annoying him about the original trilogy as opposed to the prequels where he had complete control. Hard to say. But like part of the thing about Stephen King for me reading on writing is I have the impression he knows that a lot of his stuff isn't good, but his goal, as far as I can tell, and Mr. King, if you're watching this, you can always, correct me, is to be prolific, and that is the goal. So he has this set. I think it's a minimum either 3,000 words a day or 7,000 words a day. I know I did that for myself. I actually tried his regimen, right? So many words a day, period. Doesn't matter if they're good, doesn't matter if they're bad, doesn't matter if they make sense. You get the work
Mm.
done, right? And so that's part of why it's also pantsing for him, because it's like he can
It's
start the day with
habitual.
no idea where he's going, just be like, well, I need 3,000 words, so and then whatever happens, right? Whether it fits into anything else, whether it makes sense, doesn't matter. That was the goal. You had to hit it. So that could be a contributor, let's say, to why sometimes he has his habits. I guess I'll put it that way. So
He has his
and
isms.
sure, we all do.
yeah, well, in defense of King, there, and I do have a question I wanted to throw to Matt. Here I've been holding on to, but in defense of King here, that's actually there's a part of that that's true for all pantsers, right? Because the application of the constraints, what that does is it makes it to where you don't see the 90% fail rate or 99, because I do want to say this to any
Mm.
listeners out there. If a genius is like 10%, maybe a non-genius is 1%. But that does mean if you roll the dice 100 times, you very well may succeed. And in
Hmm.
that case, your only hope is perseverance. Now, with King, I think when you have that proliferation, Isaac Asimov did it too. I don't know if I mentioned that; it was in my head. Um, yeah, when I'm writing, I throw out probably 90%, not 90, it's probably closer to maybe it's 90 actually. I rewrite sentences like just an
A vast
atrocious
majority.
number of times. Yeah, that's why I'm so slow, right? So if I get out 1,000 words in a day, I didn't write 1,000 words that day. I probably did actually write 4 or 5,000 words, but most of those words got deleted. Um, and so
Mm.
yeah, which can be disheartening to some people. I also have a very strong editing brain. I like to use a big five
Are you like
personality
an
thing.
editor or something?
I am like an editor or something.
He is to be a little bit of an editor. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like 89th percentile conscientiousness, and then like 98th percentile or openness when I did the big five thing forever ago. So the pantserness comes from the openness, I imagine, and then the editing ability or propensity, I'll call it rather than ability, make myself sound like I'm better than I am, comes from the tendency toward conscientiousness. Um, Now, that comes with deficits, like I mentioned, I write atrociously slowly. Like I said, if I'm going to write 4,000 words in a day, I would have to drink some ungodly amount of coffee, and
You're
I
still
would
doing better
be
than James Joyce.
yeah.
So, and he
But
was
the
a
Wait, who
question,
was
genius.
that? James
So,
Joy?
yeah,
sorry, what now?
Wait, you said James Joy? Who was that?
James Joyce. Yeah, the author of Ulysses. He wrote a whole bunch of short stories and poetry. He's a famous classical writer.
Okay,
I'm
I'm just
sure.
making sure I heard the name right.
Yep, James Joyce.
I'm sorry, I'm the poser here. Okay, I don't read these Ulysses kinds of.
No one has read Ulysses. It's just like no one's read Dracula.
Yeah.
No one's read most of these books ever. So don't
I
feel
will
bad
read
about
them.
it.
I need to buy them. I just to try and give back. I just actually for those of you I'll be posting
It did
about, I
sound
got a
familiar
bunch of
though.
indie
Okay.
novels. So
Maybe you can tell me
Wait,
your address. I can send you a copy of Dracula. I probably have an extra one lying around somewhere if
so
you want.
MarQuese, what was your question for Matt?
yeah, I wanted to ask that. So Matt, you mentioned that you have it sounds something like one of my rough outlines. You've got like essentially three plot points, something like beginning, middle, end. Now one thing when I'm writing that I don't actually, I never have an end in mind. Like if I have an end in mind, I won't write it.
Mm.
So I wanted to know, Matt, if uh, how it is that I'll ask this question instead. Do you always end up at that end, or do you find yourself deviating from any of your three plot points? Like, are they an inspiration to start moving, or do you constrain yourself by those points?
So I have a thematic end, kind of how, for lack of a better term, the vibe I want to be at the very end of the story. Um, Here, I'll make it very concrete. In Spirit Warrior, the three bullet points were um, Gaspar is hunted by something. Gaspar gets into a fight with the big bad, and Gaspar um, breaks this thing. I'm not going to spoil because it's actually part of the plot later on, and uh, and beats the big bad. And I'm saying big bad, but it was actually more concrete because I think you know who I'm talking about. The second villain in the story came about once I got about midway. I realized what I was doing with that big bad. So he kind of took second stage. Those three bullet points weren't adhered to from a strict concept. Like the middle is completely different. The ending, as far as what happens, is almost entirely different. Some of it
So when
actually
you
kind of
plan
has.
your ending, you don't have like an exact location or chain of events. You just want to have like hero wins at end, right?
I would say it's a little bit more concrete, but that's generally the idea. Yes.
Yeah, like you don't worry about like the actual like physical presence of where they are. Like you don't have what do you call it? Like a what's that thing in Lord of the Rings? Like the Black Gate. You don't have to have like that exact Black Gate. You can be anywhere when they end, right?
Sometimes it does matter. Like depending on the plot, you have to be in a certain place to do a certain thing. But overall,
Mm.
if that if the outcome is location independent, then yes, it would be like you know does a thing, right?
Mm.
So
And
So
that's
sorry.
oh, you had something in mind?
Sorry. Well, only if Matt is done because this is kind of confusing. So MarQuese, am I correct in understanding then, even when you have your seed idea, let's say Conti, you still don't have any idea what the end of the story will be. Like the seed is literally just that. You don't even know what kind of tree it's going to turn into, or like anything. Or did I mishear?
That's correct. And now there's going to be some vague notions that get more solidified as the story develops, right? So for One Smoke Broken, I purposely only ever thought as far as a chapter. So like never in my mind am I thinking about what's happening after this chapter is over. So I get to the chapter and I start writing, and like I learned this in grad school. It's really useful. Pantsers, actually everyone should know this because I've seen planners mess this up too, but pantsers especially mess this up. I say this as being one. Scene orientation is freaking vital. Not only for the reader to understand like what the hell is going on and where are we and when are we, because if they start asking that, like you're not being artistic, you're being non-communicative communicative. So I go in and have like the like who, what, when, or why, not really in that order. I think where and when, and then who, and then what, and then why are important. So I answer those questions for myself. Now when I start writing, oftentimes I don't have all of those answers. Like I've got whatever the seed is, right? So once I've written the first chapter, I know who some of the characters are. So I know some of the who's because they're already there, right? I already wrote them. I know some of the wheres, but not necessarily the specific of that scene. So the question is like, when you start to write a chapter, like where do I open, and why do I open there? Right. Well, what are the characters doing? What just happened? And what is the natural development after that? So after the end of One Smoke, Broken's first chapter, Conti ends up killing the monster that it's a big spoiler, but the book's out there. But he ends up killing the monster that Biller raised. Well, what are the consequences of that? Well, if any word gets out that he did that, it's like, oh, did he, this dude who's in the cave that we all hate, he went and killed the monster that was going to kill us all. You guys hear that? Like, holy crap, that thing killed the constable, killed essentially like the sheriff, the lone source of government in town. Maybe we'll be a little bit nicer to him. And like maybe Conti was an outcast because of problems developed. So in the first chapter, another thing that developed as I went on is like, how does he get by? Right. And then that's where I developed Dr. Alan Edgar, who's definitely Edgar Allan Poe. I just flipped the name around. I don't know why that either, by the way. That's a pantsing element, but that name uh, appealed to me for this character for some reason. And perhaps there's some deeper meaning that probably isn't with that one. But that guy's an asshole. He's a criminal and a bit of a liar. He's actually not that much of a liar. He's just evil. But he was part of the reason why Conti was an outcast. I discovered because I set him up to leave in the first chapter. I decided this guy is up to kind of screw over Conti in some way. And the way that he's going to do it is basically take the thing that Conti was doing, profit off the idea, take it somewhere else to make a bigger profit and leave this dude behind, right? It's not terribly screwing him over, but it's going to leave him without a contact in town and making a huge profit off of something that he didn't come up with. And essentially, when that idea developed into, well, now Conti's got to go into town himself, right? And because he has to do that, and because he ended up killing this monster that was threatening the town, the people are a little bit nicer to him, a little more tolerant of him, because they're actually getting to know him. Like it turns out that even if you're someone who people are prejudiced, here's another pantsing thing, right? So my experience, like I think there are almost no what I would call racists. Why do I think that? Because every racist person I meet that I interact with for any length of time will yield in concrete their abstract racism. And I find out that their best friend is their neighbor, who is like in this case, if they're racist, probably racist against blacks here in West Virginia. That their neighbor is black and they're actually best friends because they live next to them and they interact with them all the time. And I apply that essentially idea to the story, where okay, well now Conti's interacting with these people now because his contact left because that's what happened. So then that all of that informs me again. It's the trunk of the tree. Of what's going to generate forward. So I now, what's then the question is, well, what's the conflict now then? Right? Because I've set things up, well, things are starting to get better. What's the problem? Well, this new situation has opportunities that the old situation did not have. And Matt, you brought up thematic questions, right? So, in my notes here, because I actually, it all boils down to the thematic question in the end. So Conti was bitter before, he was seeking revenge. He confronted, the someone who is, would say, equally possessed by the spirit of vengeance, but had greater means. And that ended and got to see the disaster of that and then decide whether he was going to pursue that or turn away from it. And he ends up kind of deciding to turn away from it more and more slowly over time. Now, in terms of how that really plays out in the exact concrete, like what do you do when you're confronted with that particular spirit, right? I was asking myself that this because if I jump forward in the book, some more spoilers, I guess there's a chapter where in the process of turning away from that spirit that I myself had wrestled with and had not come to any firm conclusions about what to do about. I have Conti. He's trapped, and in order to perform some particular ritual, he can't have all these emotions muddying his soul and his spirit, and he has to essentially confront himself. And I didn't when I put him in there, had no idea what it was. Like, what does it look like to get past that and end up being kind of like a self-forgiveness thing. And this is before I had read things like the NA handbook, because I have a couple friends who are recovering addicts, and they're like, well, you're depressed, you're basically an addict, but you didn't figure out how to use drugs. Come to an NA meeting. Which is no, it was actually good for me. If you haven't been to an NA meeting or an AA meeting, you should go to one. You'll learn you'll learn that you're actually not all that different from the people there at those meetings, even if you don't happen to suffer from addiction. And but that was before I had read any of that, and I had to confront like that kind of idea of self forgiveness and what that actually looked like um, in that moment. Now, maybe I failed at executing on that. Maybe I did well. I thought I did okay, but the point is that I didn't know how I was going to get him out of that hole because I got pulled in there and thought, okay, like, how does this work? So, and that's obviously thematic, right? Like, in order to cast a spell that frees you from being trapped by essentially fairies, which are like mythological, unconscious. Erwin should be able to pick up on this.
Ah,
Spirits of the earth pull you down into the dark, where you're confronted with the spirit of an old man who is going to force upon you this guidance that lets you forgive yourself so that you can
yeah. What's
overcome
that called?
yourself.
Capitas?
Um,
Carcarus? Carpitas? The one that Jesus did when he went to the underworld and he came back.
Amaya might know this,
And yeah,
It's called
I don't know what
Carpitas, right?
term
It
you're
starts with
looking
a
for.
K. Ah,
but
I,
but
I
but the
don't
idea,
precisely.
yeah, but the idea is it's an alchemical one, right? Like in filth it will be found. You have to go down to the dark.
yeah. It sounds like you're
Uh,
just describing the general hero's journey, but instead of fighting like an outside exterior shadow, it's the shadows within him. Very similar to James and Silent Hill 2.
I've never played Silent Hill,
It's a
but
great game.
I believe you.
It's probably the best in the entire franchise.
MarQuese is a
Yeah.
poser. Everybody just saw it in 3D.
Yeah.
You're not a real alchemist unless you play Silent Hill 2.
You heard
Uh,
it here. I don't know.
yeah. So I that was a really long ramble, but I hope that that clarified things some for you, Maya, in terms of the way that goes and plays out. Now, I guess the question to throw in is, does it still kind of, because I know you said before, it sounds like planning to you, right? Um, does it still sound like planning, or is there anything different in that process
What
that
you just described to me doesn't sound like planning.
does not?
Uh, no. No, not that part.
It sounds like a continuous question and answer, rather than having the whole like you're running along the track, instead of having like, okay, I'm gonna do the whole track, it's like you're planning out step by step, and then the steps can change at any time.
Yeah, that often happens. Like, jumping off Matt's thing earlier, he mentioned like beginning, middle, end. And sometimes sometimes you end up in the same place because that's the logical sequence. Like if you're on a path and you might end up there anyway. Like I've had stories where that happens, but oftentimes and Matt mentioned also that things are often very you can actually have concrete details in your outline. Like I don't outline in
Mm-hmm.
abstractions. It's like this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. Specifics. There and I do that kind of question and answer thing while I'm doing that, but during the process of writing, ideas emerge that for me do not emerge in summary.
Oh, I have a good
Oh,
question
sure.
then.
Get that.
So
Yep.
when you're thinking of your theme, when does a theme actually pop in during your process? Does it happen like during like before you start writing or while you're writing?
I could jump in on
So,
that one. That it's
oh,
the
Matt, please
immediate
do.
thing
Matt,
that
question,
that
comments?
yep, it's the immediate thing that lights the story for me, at least on my end.
So yours is a seed, right? Like the first thing you think of is a theme.
Um, I don't know if it would. I guess you could call it a seed. So yeah, I suppose like forget. A seed would be like, how do you forgive yourself for a mistake, or how does someone who wronged another resolve that when the wronging was so grave? Like, that's the overall theme, and then
Hmm.
you kind of derive for me three
So you
bullet
think of
points.
that, and then you think of the world around that kind of idea, and then you get the characters in to be the little stand-ins for the opposing ideas.
Right. I kind of use something that Brandon Sanderson mentioned a whole bunch is iceberging. So often
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to see the entire structure to understand like what's jutting out of the water. And oftentimes, at least for me, I don't know, MarQuese, this is the question I had for you was characters kind of pop out of the ether as I'm writing this plot. So something needs to happen.
They're all Baileys.
And maybe it's a whole long like halfway through you're gonna land on a concept, right? There's a problem that needs to be solved by a character. There's a problem that needs to pop up, maybe, and usually that revolves around characters. And so often I'll be writing and right mid sentence, I'm like, I need a character, and then I'll go back and implement that character throughout the whole story, in order to catch up to that point. Do you find something similar happens in your stories, or what comes out of the ether the most for you?
The characters definitely do, but I mean all the elements do. I don't ever go back and put them in though because of the thing I mentioned before. Like for me, if I did that, that would suddenly cause this massive. It would cause a resonance cascade, and then we'd be all enslaved to the enclave, and like the Vortigaunts. So, but no, it would.
I'm
It's
bound
like throwing
by
a pebble in the
by a
water and like all the
petrol.
ripples
Yeah,
causes
so
like
it's a
a
Half-Life
tsunami somewhere
reference for
else.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
But essentially, I can't go backwards and do that. But I do come up with characters in the moment, like Von Biller. I didn't have an idea of Von Biller until right at the moment. It was like, okay, um, Conti and Broken, outcast, trying to look for revenge. They need the power to do it. They don't have it. They cannot fulfill their wills to power. So they're seeking it out from someone who does. Who does? Von Biller, right? Like, why is he Biller? Because he runs. Well, I came up with the idea that it was like a dude who runs a bank. Then I came up with the name Biller, because it was, obvious for obvious
Yeah, like
reasons,
named
right?
John Money.
Yeah, yeah. It's like literally that's what it's like. So, so a lot of characters came
So
out, like
how'd you come up
Grant.
with the monster of the village?
So part of that was I knew like when you turn against life, what you'd create is like a horrific monster. Part of what I had in mind, I think, was from the Dunwich horror. I mentioned the like Frankensteining thing, and that comes in a lot. This is and also in association with Matt's question
Hmm.
because a lot of the time there are other seeds that are waiting for their moment, right? So like the Broken is a good example of that, or the Monster is a good example of that, where there was a particular monster design that I found appealing. Maybe I'll modify it some, put it in a different context, and use it, right? In the same way, like people use dragons all the time. People use,
And the monster, it
some
came
tropes.
out after you started writing?
Yeah. Well, essentially, once I realized what Von Biller did and the consequences of it, right? So once I realized, okay, here's this dude. He's into evil stuff. Like I didn't know anything about him. I think
Mm.
like he could have been some like super powerful lich necromancer or something, but for whatever reason, that's not
So
what
you're like
came
thinking
about.
of some kind of result of his evil, and then you're like, okay, what can the result of his evil be? And then just resulted to be monster, right?
Yeah, and the monster I think was his wife. Um,
Hmm.
partly
Mm.
because when they go into his house, like, well, one, it was decided to be someone he loved, someone that he wanted to. He had to have a motivation, right? Like, why is Von Biller doing this? So as soon as I come up with Von Biller, you have to like invent why he's doing it. Like he was a banker because, okay, well, part of the elements of the setting, one of those seeds again. This is where the Frankenstein seeds come in. I would often
Yeah.
early in the morning, I worked at a coffee shop at the time, go outside and drink a coffee before the customers came in. And here in West Virginia, there's always mist over the mountains in the morning. It's really thick, and
Mm.
it's funny, that reminded me of a Magic the Gathering card, Hissing Miasma from what was it? What is the set? It's like the one with all the guilds. It's like Ravnica. There we go. And there was this like poison mist, and it's called Hissing Miasma. And I thought, what if the mist in the hills was like this, the same poison miasma? And then that kind of, okay, well, we've got this place with hills. Is it like West Virginia? Do we have like coal mines? And then like, okay, so if this is like a coal mining, like what if the village here is like a coal mining village? Then what's going to be there? Right. And then that informs what Biller is, right? So you can see I get to like Biller being a banker, not directly through Biller being a banker, but like once I have Conti, and then he's in a world. Well, what world is he in? Seed, Hissing Miasma, because it fits in like and then everything kind of connects into that. There's a little bit, it reminds me of like evolution in a bit, because with evolution you do have some level of mutation, but there are certain mutations that live and some that are detrimental. And so I think a lot of the seeding is like, okay, what other seed idea can be a mutation that then fits, that is fit for survival, for replication. Um, Now, if we reel this back, you asked me about the monster design Dunwich horror, which comes off of the uh, why specifically the Dunwich horror. I think that probably came from this idea that I had that like Lovecraft was right, which I started saying a few years ago, where the well he was archetypally, I think he was right, in a lot of ways, that like there is this, the truth about the deep unknown actually is terrifying. Um and so when you delve down under the earth into, let's say, into a crypt, and you try to look upon if you as a human being go and try and look upon the face of the waters, a leviathan comes out. And so because I got that impression from Lovecraft, a Lovecraftian-esque monster is the result of human beings trying to act as gods and delving into things that they trying to steal the power of a god for themselves, for their own ends, which is what Von Biller did. Like that's, you know, and even now I'm kind of pantsing that together. Like at the time, because I mentioned that before, like I haven't mentioned this. So, oh, Matt, tell me if this is the case for you, because I've been talking too long. When you're pantsing in the act of writing, do you also, in a sense, go into a bit of a state of reverie where um, there's eh, how best to describe it? It's like if you're driving a long distance and like there's like a huge chunk of time, like maybe 30 minutes goes by, and you're like, what happened? I don't remember the last 30 minutes. I don't know if you've ever been on a long drive and that's happened to you. Um, but it's like that when I'm writing. Like if when I get into it and then like an hour goes by, it's like, whoa, what happened? Like how did I
You have
get
like a
here?
little time warp.
I would
Yeah,
say so,
Matt.
yes. It's
Yeah.
probably a little bit more meditative, where time passes in the setting that I'm kind of writing about, at that moment. So, you know, if a scene is like 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, only 10 minutes pass, and I'm look at the clock, and it's like, oh, it's 2 hours. Oops.
So both of you guys who are pantsing, you both have like a little movie playing in your head while you're typing.
I would say so, yeah.
I don't
Okay, you
really.
MarQuese?
I have a terrible visual imagination. Like my spatial intelligence is that of a monkey.
Oh
So
dear.
So when you're thinking of your story and you're typing, are you thinking of it in words or thinking of it in pictures?
Both.
for me, it's a lot of it is words, but for me, words carry a lot of other. It's not exactly sensory. I don't get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sense information. I get a lot of um, emotion that is associated with the connotation more than I do imagery or more than I do like senses of like smell or taste or even sounds for that matter. I get
Oh,
some, but
okay.
they're vague. I think it's why things like animation appealed to me more than like if I could watch something that's animated or live action. My brain likes the animated thing better, and I think that it has to do with my poor visualization. The simpler symbol works better for me. And that's a
So for you,
deficit
it's kind of
actually.
like when you dream, like when you dream and when you wake up, you remember the feeling, but you don't remember the images.
Most of the time, yeah. Like I can almost never. I can remember like some vague frames of the
Like you can
dream, but
remember what you
not
were
much.
scared of something, but you don't remember what it was, and then you like kind of wake up shaking or something, or you wake up and something was funny in the dream, but then you don't remember what it was.
So, I mean, sometimes I might remember what it was, but if it's like I might not remember like an image what it looked like at all. Where some people report
Yeah,
like
yeah,
ultra vivid dreams, it's not the same for me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Amaya.
If I could cut in
You too,
something.
Matt, or not really?
On my end, I have ultra vivid dreams. So I once had a nightmare about an art
Very
deco
visual.
demon.
Assume
All
that
right,
the
sorry,
answer is
Amaya, what were you saying?
Well, actually, sorry, Mike, because you had told me to interrupt like a bazillion years ago, and then I didn't. So I actually wanted to comment on because you had said that you didn't think you had an example of a mystery being pantsed, and then I raised my hand because I was gonna like weigh in on there because, and you can maybe you guys, since you're both pantsers, can maybe tell me about this. In my experience with pantsing, which usually happens when I'm a DM, because and the reason you have to pants when you're a DM is because you have absolutely no control over what everyone else does.
yeah.
It does not
Oh yeah.
matter what the end of the campaign is; that people will just do what they want. I actually had tried to set up mysteries, um, and I couldn't do it as a DM because players just do whatever they want. But I've also tried. I have tried to write mysteries. I like mysteries. I just suck at them. I suck hard. And I don't know if you can actually pants
Really?
one because a lot of a mystery ends up having to be like proper misdirection, proper placement of evidence in the way that doesn't give the game away, but also still at the end is like, oh, it all came together, right? There's a lot of sort of pre-planning that has to be there because mysteries well, in the mysteries where, for example, you want to at least give the reader enough information where theoretically they're paying attention, they could solve it, and then of course you're so smart that they didn't solve it, and then haha, and they go, of course, I'm an idiot, right? That requires, I think, a lot of groundwork. So I'm not sure if you guys then have the sense that that kind of mystery maybe can't be pantsed or not, like just structurally.
I'd pants it like a
I
riddle. Have you guys written riddles before?
Not good ones.
Like the kind that Galloom says in Lord of the Rings?
Column?
I've not read Lord of the Rings, so
Galloom?
tell me.
Galloom.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gollum.
Yeah, people
Uh,
tend to say golem instead. They're two different words, but yeah.
mm, oh, now I know. But no, if you write a riddle, um, what you do is you start with a seed idea, and then you use
Mm-hmm.
connotation to bring up a way of describing that thing that is, uh, let's say, rife with double meanings. Usually, that's like a good riddle,
Oh
right? So a
yeah.
good riddle, yeah. So um, I think for a mystery, you would do the same thing, right? You would the seed is probably you could do it other ways, I'm imagining, but you might have the seed be like the crime that was committed.
To be otherwise, I don't know how you do
Oh, you know what?
mystery.
That actually does remind me though, if I can interrupt. So there actually are two main types of puzzles I forgot what the first one was called. I think it's called Literal or something like that, or Lateral. And then the other one, it's like more outside the box thinking. So Pantsers, they had to have a riddle or a puzzle that's outside the box, where it's very open. And that's why it is possible to make a mystery, but it's almost like it's a mystery to the writer as well, until they kind of open up more outside the box thinking.
Yeah, you have to be really like if you can write. I really believe if you can write riddles, if you can write mysteries. I think I didn't have this association before you brought this up, Amaya. So thank you. It's really insightful.
Mm.
I think that you could also, uh, if you could do riddles and you could do mysteries, you could also do what was the thing I was just thinking of? I can't even remember. Erwin, what did you just say to me? It's getting late in the evening.
Lateral thinking.
Lateral thinking. Yeah, yeah. So your connotation. You could write poetry. That's what I was going with this. So
Connotation.
yeah, because essentially that's if you ever write poems like which I recommend that all young men do, write poetry to rotate young women. It's a good idea, even if you get laughed at. Just do it.
The meme you
But
made fascinating woman by presenting her with.
but it's all
Sorry.
about
And if you
connotation.
can't
You
write
know, it's
poems, just write songs. Same thing.
essentially yeah. But the idea is, you know, if I was writing a riddle and you mentioned, okay, there's I mean, you could do it both ways actually, because if you have like the scene of whatever the mystery is, the question, and then I could imagine myself writing, well, like, what is it that left this? And like,
Mm.
you know, and like, as long as you're obeying the constraints of narrative. I mentioned that way at the beginning, and I have no idea how long we've been chatting for, about an hour and a half. So
Yep.
for someone who's been listening this whole time is like, what the fuck is this? This is not a
And is still
guide.
awake.
Uh,
We're pantsing. It's how it is.
yeah. So this is so.
We're gonna have to edit out like 80% of this.
Oh no, I don't edit anything. Um, but what essentially, if you obey the constraints of what works, like what think of it again like an evolutionary process. It's memetics fundamentally. What ideas are fit for the environment that they have come up in, right? So, like, you can start with whatever seed you want, and then from that seed, you develop the environment. You explore, like Matt said, you explore the environment, and so the mystery will you can have faith, I would say, that the mystery story that you're working will work as long as you are not saying, well, this would be cool if this happened. Like if you just don't like if you have a tree and you don't have like um disembodied, but like disconnected branches that don't connect to anything. If you don't do that, there's no reason why your story should suddenly become incoherent, I would think. And you know, you mentioned DMing, which I've done before as well, Amaya. Essentially, that's kind of what I'm sure you ended up having to do. Like you had this, maybe had this idea, and like maybe it was a mystery, and you wanted them to find a clue, and like they just did something that made like they're never going to find that clue, and they went and explored this other thing. So then you're like, okay, there's a secret passage here, there wasn't before, but now there is. And like
Right.
and you find something else, and from as long as you just keep building off of what's already there, you should be fine. There's a YouTuber, Strat Edgy, does like video game videos, but I like his commentary quite a lot. I don't really have time to listen to a lot of his videos, and he plays a lot of games I'm not interested in, but he brings up uh, what the actual creditor of this, which is the writers of South Park, of all things. And
Mm.
I was kind of confused at first when I heard him say this until I have witnessed the infraction done by a number of people, and then I understand. Okay, this is a real problem. He says that they use because writing, not and then. Like this happens because this, which like you know everything is
Ah,
happening
yeah.
because caused by the prior thing. You get a coherent chain of events, and then it's kind of hard to mess up if you do that. Like you can still, you can not understand how tension
Because they'll
works
change
and read it
one
this way.
direction, but then the and then can go branch off into different directions.
Oh, and yeah, and then pretty much becomes incoherent almost instantly. If you've ever listened to like a 3-year-old tell a story, in there it's always an and then, right? Because like I forget where I saw this. I think it was on like an MST3K, but someone was basically like outlining their 3-year-old written a story about a hero named Doorknob Man, right? And they just straight up, they didn't edit or anything. So like, and then Doorknob Man found whatever, and then Doorknob Man found the people that were locked up. You're just like, what? What is happening and why? It's no clue. The whole story is just, and then another thing occurred, right? Completely independent of
I've heard of
anything else.
Doorknob Man. I've heard of Doorknob Man. He's a sidekick of Jar Boy.
Well, no, his thing is his power was doorknobs. I mean, it was a 3-year-old that wrote it, so you gotta like just let it be. But yeah, his power was doorknobs. Exactly
And
how
just
that
to
made
jump in,
sense was just yeah.
just to jump
Matt,
in
comment?
too, um, properties of a mystery can. I mean, a mystery can still hold water even if some of the properties change about it. So, another DM story is, I did a 3-shot campaign, which was supposed to be like uncovering a den of thieves, but in turn, the informant that they had, like the party killed them because they tried to rob them and failed.
Oops.
Uh, so then the ending was no longer thieves' den; it was a vampire den because he came back to life as an undead ghoul.
Hmm.
Oh,
So,
see, there you go. That's thinking outside the box.
uh, pantsing and improvisation, even in comedy or whatever, kind of hold the same properties. You can do yes, but, or no, and
Yeah.
To an
and
extent,
kind of
but like
follow a
a
plot
joke
like
better have
that.
a punchline.
What's that? I'm
Otherwise, you end
sorry.
up a joke better have a punchline. Otherwise, it's just going to be Ghostbusters 2016.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, there's always a risk of running into creating nonsense. I think with any sort of pantsing, but keeping in mind what you want to say in general is the best way to pants, I think.
I want to jump in really quickly because I think what we're looking at isn't a necessarily pantser problem. I think you see it more amongst pantsers because people who plan are more likely to understand the technical aspect of story structure, right? So, and I think a lot of people, if you're formally trained, you're more likely to plan. If you're not as formally trained, you're more likely
Mhm.
to pants. That's not always the case, but I think you go through an institution, they're going to teach. They have to teach you something, right? This is the thing in grad school is
Oh,
th- there was
they're supposed to.
a well, they're supposed to, yeah, but
Yeah.
the thing is, a lot of the time, I'll tell the story. So, one of my professors, Jason Ockert, I got into like shuttle to the airport with him way back. I think it was after my third term. Yeah, my third term in grad school, and he said to me in his kind of quiet voice, he's like, the truth is, like, you can't actually teach someone how to write. And the reason why he said that to me in private, and I did not hear him repeat anything like that to anyone else, um, and I don't think he'll have a problem with me saying it because I'll explain it, is that the reality is,
He had to like look over his shoulder before saying it. It's like, all right, let me make sure nobody's watching us.
I
You
don't
can't
think it
teach
was like
people
a
how to
deep
write.
dark secret, but it's like what Tsunotomo said about Buddhism. Like Tsunotomo said, it's a bad idea to teach young people about Buddhism; they'll get the wrong idea. Um,
Yeah.
which is, but I think the same thing is true with what he said there. You can get the wrong idea, but there's truth about it in that when someone's going to go teach you something, they need something to teach you. You can get a bad editor who does this as well, where that editor will give feedback because they feel as though it's necessary because that's the reason that they're there. So there's a lot of teachers who go in and like they'll say they'll teach you how to write, and they'll teach you a useful skill, but they're not teaching you how to write. What they're teaching you is the general story structure that if I should correct myself, if they are actually teaching you something, they'll teach you something like Freytag's triangle, basically. And there's other elements to it, but when you really boil it down, it ends up just being Freytag's triangle. And I think a lot of pantsers don't understand what a plot is. I think they don't understand what tension is. I think they don't understand, like, that you have to have a complication. You don't have to call it a complication. That's the word I use for it, but which is that let's say Yes, but or no furthermore, I think is the way I've heard it worded, but
Some
there's all
sort of
kind of ways.
antagonistic force. Otherwise, it's just your character is just waltzing through a story with absolutely no challenges,
Yeah.
like modern day storytelling. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
that
yeah.
It
has,
was
and you have to understand what a climax is, because thing people say it's a moment of greatest tension. It's like, kind of, but that doesn't tell you what the fuck it's doing. A climax is where is the determining moment that dictates the resolution. The resolution is essentially something like, is this a comedy or a tragedy? And a comedy and tragedy is relevant to the thing that was at stake for the goddamn story, which is relative to the motivations of the protagonist. Because that's what a story is. It's a story about the motivations of the protagonist, the thing they have at stake, whether or not they get it or don't, and why, right? Which is the answer to the thematic question, which forms a theme inevitably. And I think the problem is, like, planners, I think oftentimes will have encountered that, um, which is good. But I think a lot of time pantsers, it's not because they're pantsing, but they, because of a typically a lack of formal training that goes in with, just essentially working off of improv. They're less likely to know about those things, and so when they're writing a scene, they're yes, but or no furthermore is not a because, it is an and then, if that makes sense. Like, that's
I think for a lot of amateur writers, it's more where they're trying to mimic what they've seen on TV or in games or anything. Like they're just trying to do what they've seen in the past.
sure, but everyone starts out doing that. There's nothing wrong that
But
as
then
long as that's where you're
there's no actual
starting.
set like idea what it's supposed to be.
I think I
Or
get
like
what
how
you're
the person who made it got there to begin with.
Well, sure. Most people, well, again, the problem with that one ends up being if they're just starting or not. If they're just starting, that's totally forgivable and how everyone starts. Where it becomes a
Yeah.
problem is if they don't want to improve, right? Like if they're in a writing group and you see this person, you're like, oh, okay, I see where you are. And you give feedback and they're kind of like, no, this is just my style. And you're like, oh boy, you're never going to go anywhere, right? Because they're not interested at that point in actually understanding anything. They just see, I want to be famous. I can't wait to sign my name on my painting or whatever and be the next Picasso without actually any interest in doing the work, right? So that's the
Yeah, yeah,
difference.
yeah.
I would say fundamentally it's okay if people start there. The problem is if they stay there.
Oh no,
I
I'll just
think
remarking how it's where they don't have an understanding of how the story is structured, and so they're only going off of what they've seen, and they don't
Sure.
know the process. Same way as like somebody sees like I don't know like a pizza, they don't have no idea what's in it, but they're trying to like make the dough without knowing what there's supposed to be yeast in there, and then it comes out like flatbread or something, you know,
Sure. And that's again,
because they
as long
don't
as
see yeast.
someone is willing to learn, then it's okay. Like
Totally, yeah.
obviously
All
you
right,
wouldn't
MarQuese, what were you
publish
saying?
that, you know.
Well,
I'm
smart people wouldn't, but
I mean these days
plenty of
probably
people
it's just
online are
wouldn't
doing that.
publish it.
yeah,
That's
I
what the
think
editor is for.
for some, yeah. I mean, um I was thinking, Erwin, you had a pretty decent explanation there, where there's a lack of, I'd say, lack of depth of comprehension. This might even
Mhm.
go into a conversation about art versus escapism versus propaganda that I had with Nathan Cumberledge a long time ago. And I think pantsers are more vulnerable to escapism, whereas planners are more vulnerable to propaganda for what
I
to me
would say
seemed to be
Mhm.
that's fair.
obvious. Yeah, because
Mhm.
if the propaganda is like, I have the answer to the theme ahead of time, and I'm just trying to find a way to get around your logic brain and tap into your emotions and convince you
Right. And
that
just
it's
have
true.
my freaking sock puppet come out here and tell everybody how it is.
Yeah, and like I always
Giving
tell everyone, as much
lectures.
as I love Ayn Rand, like Rand's novels are like
Oh
that. It's
boy.
kind of annoying. Yeah, like I read Anthem when I was young, and it was influential to me, and like, it's cool or whatever. And there's some cool lines in Atlas Shrugged, but like also it's definitely like, here's how I'm right. Look, everybody, I'm right. um,
So
but
you'd
on
say
the
it's
other
more
end,
propaganda.
yeah, I actually do think that
Yeah.
Rand's work are essentially propagandistic. Uh, even if she was right about some things, and there's other things she's definitely not only just not right about, but definitely projecting a power fantasy like Dagny Taggart. It's like, and also the men. It's like, no, no, I'm sorry, Rand. you're not going to have the greatest of all men be perfectly okay. Oh, I'm perfectly okay going with you, this other man. Like, no, the men are going to fight each other, or they're going to realize you're like a freaking tramp and then throw you to the road. Anyway,
Well, I mean,
um,
that book was like
That's
Twilight
the
before
in where
Twilight
we can
came
talk
out,
about it.
so you know.
yeah,
But to
yeah,
get back as far as also even with escapism versus propaganda and everything else, and people not understanding how to do writing, a lot of this I will say still fundamentally comes down to education, um, which across the board now, all the Western world, not just in the United States, Europe, everywhere, is just it's woeful, right? Where part of the reason that you're getting these like young adults who just have no concept of how story is, aside from what they've just seen and passively absorbed,
Hmm.
and again, not passively, not actively absorbed, is because they've never at any point been taught to critically analyze or to think. And so all their in some I don't want to say this in like a denigrating way because it's not their fault, right? But that they have been set up to be again just the consumer. So yeah, they've seen how a story sort of looks, but they don't have the tools to even begin think like it's actually so bad. Some of the other kids in my college classes, it's not just that they didn't understand because they didn't understand whatever. They didn't even know that it was possible to ask a question to start understanding. That's how bad it was, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
that's a much worse issue actually than just sort of being, oh wow, stories are cool. Can I learn it? Right? It's and that's a serious problem, and it's probably maybe a reason why a lot of media these days is so atrocious because if people have just been sort of raised to passively let things wash over them with no analysis, with absolutely no understanding, or even a concept that there could be anything to look at aside from the keys jangling in your face, then yeah, I guess maybe as long as it looks pretty or it sounds right, then it looks okay to them, maybe.
Do you
yeah.
guys think that planners can have a big problem with this escapism thing? Like, how do you say? Can somebody like be stupid enough, or I guess amateur enough to plan out just senseless nonsense?
I, I mean, I
Yeah.
suppose it's possible. I don't know if I can think of an example off the top of my head, but
So like at the end of the day, whether you're a pantser or a plotter, you're not safe from this kind of ironically propaganda that's causing you to think that everything, all art is the same and subjective, and
well, I mean,
Mona Lisa is the same thing as a toilet on the wall.
well, okay, like I mean, you can have it certainly. By the way, pastors can absolutely do the propaganda as long as that wasn't the thing. I mean, if you look at
Mm.
how was it Multiverse of Madness was written, heavy quotes on writing, because they were literally just laying tracks as they were going, but they still got the
Yeah, yeah,
propaganda
yeah.
part done because that was still part of the plan. So,
Yeah,
the
that's
whole
still
movie
part of
is
the plan.
yeah, I mean, the whole movie is still completely incoherent. I mean, the plot is very difficult to follow. Characters just contradict themselves like every like scene, and there's a number of reasons why that happened. So, um, that's why I mean, like theoretically, then a planner could fall maybe to the whole like escapism thing. I'm just like I say, I'm trying to think of an example, but maybe a planning escapist. Maybe they never get anything done because they just spend all
That's
their
a I was
time
gonna say that.
planning how.
I met him. I met them.
Oh,
It's the
yeah,
guy who
yeah,
tells you about his all his ideas, and he has like the whole
Oh no, he's in
world.
yeah.
the
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
Yes.
in the
that
coffee
guy.
shop, like, "Here's my
World
award-winning
builder.
screenplay I've been working on it for 40 years, guys." It will totally he's the guy from Camus' The Plague, which you haven't read yet, Mark. That's the guy who's been writing a novel for, like, 15 years, and he has the first
Yes,
sentence, and it's still
everybody
not quite
on
right.
magic building and world building.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've met plenty of
It's
those
essentially a
guys.
redditor.
Yeah. But why did I want to bring up the escapism bit and the pantsing bit? I cannot remember now. Perhaps it'll come back to me. These things usually do. We've kind of come all the way to the end though. We're running low on time. So what I'd like to do is just to give a quick overview. So this actually turns out to be a guide in the end, right? Like what is the
It's
guide to
coherent.
pantsing? Right. So if you planners out there, if you wanted to pants a story, um, really the idea is start with a seed. I suppose you could have compound seeds, like a couple seeds that are grouped together. It's fine, and then you then generate via I'll use Erwin's terminology because I liked it. A question and answer process as you're writing. You're constantly asking yourself why a thing is, and then answering that question why the thing is to fill in the details. You should feel free to take whatever seeds are fit for the let's say environment, which is the text that you've written, the story that you've written thus far, the other seeds that you plucked out. And I would actually encourage people never to worry about having, let's say, seeds from other inspirations. And actually, what I think is you should have a bunch, like a ton, like so many that by the time you end up with your story, it's rife with um, so many inspirations that someone can't really pick them out. Because I think otherwise, again, a podcast with Nate, another tirade here, but we talked about originality. And in that podcast, we basically said if you try to be perfectly original, you're just going to rip off like one source. That's what's going to happen, probably. And you look at people who try to do that, and like, and you can say, "Oh, your story's like this." And by the way, if you ever to dishearten someone like that, that's what you do. You just tell them what their story's like, and then they're like, "Ah!" But you have all those seeds that are fit with each other, that are coherent in that question answer form, and when you're doing that, eventually you're going to come to that thematic question. That's going to come up. It's probably going to come up pretty fast, actually. Once you have a character and you get to the character's motivations, the thematic question usually pops up right then and there. And then from that point, you use that question and answer format to work toward the answer to that thematic question. And when you're pantsing, you you like Matt said, you might have an idea about where that answer is going to go, but you don't direct it to that preconception. You move toward the problem being solved, you move toward the question. And then in the moment when you arrive there, that's the only time that you say, okay, here I am with these characters in these circumstances that have developed. This tree has grown. I've reached the end of the branch, the high end of the highest branch where the flower is meant to bloom. Given the nature of this tree thus far, what does the flower look like and smell like, and does it bear fruit, or is it poison? Right? Is it a comedy? Or is it a tragedy? And unfortunately, that's kind of all there really is to pantsing. I say that's all there really is because when you say it
One
like that,
bullet
it's
point.
very simple. Yeah, but it's question and answer toward the emergent thematic question, and then you find the emergent answer to that question. Um, and yeah, I think that about sums up like 2 hours of talking. So,
I think so
uh,
too.
any last words from any of you? Any little tips or things that you want to cover that you didn't get a chance to cover during the course of the conversation?
Um, I do have one last question, just like a real quick one. Uh, so for you and Matt, what is preventing you from being a planner?
Go ahead, Matt. You can answer that one first.
Sure. I think the main key is that it sort of robs the essence of these moments where, at least for me, characters specifically, because I see that more often, but there are also settings that appear as I'm writing it. And the problem with when these characters arrive is that they will often veer off course up plan. Just to be very concrete, the actual villain in Spirit Warrior is something completely different, and I didn't know that was the villain until the moment he arrived in that scene. I wrote the scene when he walked up these stairs and this ruined village, and I was like, "Well, I have to go back and add him in because this has to be it." And then there sparked a chain of events that completely deviated from the initial story. It still got to the same point, but it was far more interesting than the initial concept that I put out. So
Happens
if
in
I'm going to go
planning
through
too.
all of this planning and I'm going to, fine tune every little detail, the moment a character arrives or the moment this scene changes or the moment these two characters clash in ways that wasn't planned, I've just wasted a whole boatload of time for no good reason.
I mean, you could look at it that way, I guess. But I
And
think
then
that
you,
writing
MarQuese?
14,000 words and finding out that you totally wrote yourself into a corner and there's no way out, but having to delete all of that is way more work than just making an outline. And then to fix the outline, you have to go back and fix the outline.
I mean, I write fast enough that 14,000 words is, oops, I wasted 3, 4, 5 days of writing,
Oh
and I
man,
didn't do it right.
I don't like wasting 3 or 4 or 5 days.
I mean, it's the
So
same thing with plotting, though. If you sit there and plot for 3, 4, 5 days, and then you write it, and you're like, "Oh, wait, No, I can't do that because in this individual moment, these two characters can't actually do that because XYZ. Um,
I'd say at that point, it's like, do you want to spend passive time thinking or active time writing?
yeah, and active time writing is more meaningful because even if you can't use a
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
passage because you wrote yourself into a corner, let's just say, there's nothing stopping you from ripping all of that, the concepts out of that, and actually transforming it into something new because you're going to do that anyways because you have to edit the
I don't know, maybe
yeah
I
the
just work
manuscript.
differently. Because, yeah, if I lose 14,000 words, I end up getting stuck for the next 2 months and having to completely rethink everything, as opposed to if I just sat down and figured it out ahead of time.
Wait until you
uh,
hear about Spirit Warrior 3. I completely rewrote the book. That's
yeah, I mean,
55,000
such
words I
things can
threw
happen.
up.
Yeah, so I
What
don't know.
about Spirit
I'm
Warrior
trying to
number
avoid
13?
another 2 years of
In the book.
writer's block. Like 2 years, I cannot write anything.
So
And then
I
you,
just thought,
MarQuese?
I have
I forgot the
something really
question,
funny. Just
honestly.
I
What
remember the
was my
question.
question?
Um,
Okay.
it was what? Actually, I can't even remember the
Prevents
question now
you
either.
from being a planner.
Oh, what prevents me? Yeah. So similar answer to Matt in some way. So the similar part is, and this is going to perhaps sound pretentious or a little bit woo-y, but you often hear musicians say this. So in the act of writing, I don't actually feel as though the ideas are mine, if that makes sense. I feel more like I'm a filter for something that is more transcendent than myself. Like, and now because I'm like a union or whatever, I would say it's like when I'm in the act of doing something creative, I'm allowing my instincts to take over, and that's coming from what he'd call the collective unconscious, which he just should have called your instincts because that's what it is. But that's like you could Joseph Campbell would call that the body, right? So the art comes up out of the body because that's where the archetypal symbols have their greatest meaning in us. And now, if I was more religious in the conventional sense, I would say that the inspiration, the spirit that comes within, is like the Holy Spirit, and it's God, trying to use me as a conduit to to create something meaningful into the world, something like that. I think that's for there's some of that, but I think there's a more fun answer. And I think the answer is funny because of the panel that we have. So I also think that I have um, certain deficits of character that I think are inherited. And I think that I've been blessed with a perhaps above average verbal IQ, but I mentioned before, I don't think I have a whole lot of spatial intelligence. I struggle with mathematics frequently. Like I'm good with like spatial, like physical moving around. Like I said, I did martial arts, but like in terms of the conceptualization, it's very poor. And I think having very poor um, that poor spatial skills has something to do with like maybe not being a very good engineer, and then that being very, and I'm also kind of
Hmm.
impatient. Like if I got really spicy and I said something like I don't know, something like a race realist would say, it's like um the African in me is more impulsive and in tune with like primitive pagan spirit nonsense, and is just trying to like act that out when I'm doing my writing. Like sometimes I think that. um so I think that there's like my native abilities are not very good for planning. Like I'm not a very good planner. I don't have the patience or the um foresight. I'm better at reacting in a moment than I am at looking forward into the future. Like even my how I live my daily life, very regimented, but it's not out of a plan. It's I shrink my time scale down really small, and that's how I can handle the world. And sometimes it ends up looking the same as planning, but the process is very, very different. In the same way that you can take an agreeable person and a conscientious person, their behavior can be the same, but the motivations are very, very different, and the emotions inside them. Or you could take someone who's very extroverted or very neurotic. And if they're both conscientious and neurotic, the behavior might look a bit like the extrovert, but that has to do with the fact that they're trying to avoid the terrible negative emotions smashing into them all the time. So they'll do stuff that perhaps someone who would be motivated by positive emotion would do. So, so what prevents me from being a planner? I don't know. I'm a monkey. That's my answer to that. See if we get
The
one
Joe
more
Rogan
strike from
answer.
YouTube. So,
I think
all
that's actually a
right.
good answer though, because it is just you doing things that are part of your daily routine. Even if you're orderly with how you do things, you don't have an actual like written down checklist in front of you. It's in your head, like just as a habit.
Yeah, I don't function well when I have a checklist. Like I've tried having a day planner, and the way I live my life, it looks like I have a day planner because I do the same goddamn things I do. Like I do things as if I have the checklist, but if I have the checklist, I get stressed out. Like I can't handle it. So,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, the I can't plan because I'm a monkey. That's the answer. So with that,
Are you
we'll
a
go
monkey
ahead
as
and
well, Matt, or are you different? Monkey Matt, comment.
Yes, I am a meat popsicle. No, the
Reference.
that is a Fifth Element reference. Yes.
It
Um,
is.
the big thing I think is I agree with MarQuese that there is a certain, I guess, divine push. I guess I'll rephrase it like that.
Sure. In
That
all creativity and for all writers, as far as I can tell, planners and pantsers both have that.
right. Yeah, I think it's true in every sense. Like a real artist, quote unquote, doesn't actually own what they're making. They just sign on the dotted line that says that theirs. But in a way that like this emergence of this story, yes, uh, I definitely am sitting on the same branch as Marquise.
So now we
all
need
right.
mascots then for planners and pantsers. We have the pantsers are monkeys. What are the planners then? Like I don't know. We have to find like some weird OCD
Spiders.
animal. Maybe they're like beavers. I
Planners
don't
are the
know. They're like,
birds
oh, look
making
at all
little
this
nests.
chaos. Hmm?
Planners are birds making nests, and we're all on branches. It's just that there's the monkey next to the bird.
Maybe that's how it
Macaques
is.
and macaws. Macaques and macaws. I like that.
Because okay, there you go.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. This has it been the planner's guide to pantsing, if you want to call it that. I've had with me Amaya Tenshi, Matt Dawson, and Erwin Blackthorn. Their links are going to be down in the description. I won't make them suffer through going through pitching all their stuff again. And mine will as well. And we'll see you guys next time.